Hi guys, I'm Shmi. Hello and welcome back to the channel where today is going to be quite the experience. Something I'm really rather looking forward to, a full visit and first drive in this, the KTM X-Bow GT-XR. We're here in Graz, Austria at the home of KTM Sport Car, and this is something that's probably going to take both me and you by surprise. We've got a canopy that electronically opens forwards. We've got 500 horsepower in a car that weighs a little over 1,100 kilos. But before we get to all of the details, we're here in the showroom with some of the earlier cars from the company. We've got the GT2 race cars, the GT-X as well, cars that derive from KTM's motorsport successes, now in a proper supercar with some amazing details. And believe me, when we head next into the production facility to see how these are assembled, to see what goes into the car, how they come together, and the way that the carbon fiber for the monocoque and the different technology is used, you're going to see some things that aren't necessarily familiar. And then it will be time to grab the keys, slide myself into the GT-XR, and go and find out what it's like. Before we go out and experience this, we'll head to the production facility, but there is one thing I want to show you right now, because a car like this, a super sports car, is supposed to be spectacular. It is supposed to be dramatic, and the way that this canopy opens at the pull of the lever on the side is really quite remarkable. Hinged towards the front, of course, that's for your access to the seating area inside the carbon fiber monocoque, extensive use of lightweight materials, motorsport elements, the exposed pushrod suspension, but we're going to come back to that in just a moment. I will close it back down. Behind me, we have the production hall, which we're going to be taking a look through, but let's start right here in the showroom, where in fact, these are some of the earlier X-Bows. The company began back in 2008 with this open driving experience, an engine supplied by Audi. These are the 2015 refreshed cars, but with significant changes coming to homologation later towards 2019, things had to change a bit. In fact, they built a GT4 race car version, taking the original car, giving it a new body, enclosing the cockpit, and a totally new look, before it was time for the new model, the X-Bow GT. This is the GT2, the race car. You'll notice a few differences, for example, mirrors, obviously the plastic windows as opposed to glass, as well as the GT2s though, we also have the GT-X, which is effectively the unrestricted variant of the car. We've got the mirror system, the CMS system. We've got so many other things that are very, very clever about these, but fundamentally based around the road model, based around the GT-XR. Shortly, I'm going to be experiencing what it's like to drive this, and I'm super intrigued at the moment to get out onto the road. Obviously, we're going to go and take a look at the assembly as well, but by way of a bit of a walk around, an introduction, if you will, to the GT-XR, it is a big step forwards from the X-Bow, a new segment of the market, enclosed, further use of carbon fiber, more power, of course. In fact, when you start digging in underneath the skin, there's so much to this which blows you away. The engine is the 2.5 litre turbocharged 5-cylinder that we know, supplied by Audi, of course, the likes of the RS3, producing 500 horsepower, combined with a car that weighs exceptionally little. Now, I cannot get enough of opening up this cockpit, opening the canopy, the way that pivots forwards, but then diving more into the interior. And I'm going to climb in just a moment. You have a removable steering wheel. The seats are literally part of the tub. You adjust the pedal box. You've got a storage area behind. And in fact, I'm going to show you through to the engine here as well. You open it by pulling the latch, lifting this up, then you literally pull this towards the back. The interesting thing back here though is that you have 160 litres of storage. This is a new car, hence the sealed luggage back there, and then the engine. The 2.5 litre turbo 5-cylinder, 500 horsepower, 581 newton meters of torque, and we have a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Of course, this translates to something that will sound the part, will drive the part, but in a car that weighs dry 1,130 kilos, even wet it's only 1,250 kilos, is quite the power to weight. You actually have a 96 litre fuel tank as well, which is good for some serious range on a WLTP cycle, 1,000 kilometers, but more realistically, many sessions on a racetrack without having to pull in to go and fuel it up constantly. It is a fully homologated road car. You actually have the camera systems here with many different screens inside to be able to see everything that's going on. There are 4 different cameras as part of the CMS system. To step into the car, what you can do is remove the steering wheel with its latches, and I'm just going to pull this out to show you. On the back, Love that feel of the shifters. You've got these releases top and bottom, and you can actually stow this to make entry and exit even easier on a system that they've installed right above. That then stays there even when you close the canopy, so that you can literally slide yourself in. And I'm still learning. When you've done it a few times, it certainly gets easier, but you slide yourself in and take a seat. This is one of the limited edition. The first 100 of the new car are all limited edition. Starting from there, we've got the full exposed gloss carbon fiber on the bodywork. Of course, lots of different options and specifications that we're going to take a look at a little bit later on. I'm going to close this firstly though, just so you can see the look of it. And then I'm going to try and take a step inside. So that just shuts down, give it a press, it latches into place. And then the process to get in here effectively is to sit up on the side, which is of course PPF'd on here, swing your legs around, step on in underneath the steering wheel and take a seat inside the carbon fiber tub. Now in here, gosh, this feels cool. This feels really cool. Let me pop off the steering wheel, latch that back on in here. Easily enough to do. We're going to see how things like this are assembled as well. But this is where, if I close down the canopy, I have the full inside experience. This is crazy. This feels absolutely crazy in here. I've got the cameras I'm looking at, which show me what's going on outside. Obviously the screen is now illuminated on the steering wheel. We'll dive more into the interior a little bit later on. But yeah, I can tell you right now, this is going to be a fun thing to drive. But before we do, let me pop this back on here. Let's go and take a look around the production facility. It's actually a holiday week at the moment, so it's very quiet here, and it means we've got special access to go and take a look around. The assembly line is down towards the far end, but we begin at this side with all of the storage racks, all of the parts that are arrived, ready to be taken over to their respective cars. I want to pick out a few key things though that stand out to me, and if we come through here, you will spot the carbon fiber monocoques. Now up on the racks there, you'll see the monocoques ready for the road cars. I'm standing next to one though for the GT2 race series. Now what's interesting is that both the carbon fiber monocoque and the steel cage are independently FIA approved. Both of them have FIA approval. The advantage of a carbon monocoque like this that you step over to be inside the car is even more rigidity and even more safety. Safety and security, obviously things that are very important when you get to a high level of performance. You'll spot the differences in the tubs though, because of the way they have the cutouts, of course, for the cage to go through, which is just a requirement for GT2 homologation. This whole package, even with the cage, only weighs around 120 kilos, which means I can actually, with my left hand, just pivot this up on its racking here, which is kind of cool. Obviously, that gets sunk down beneath all of the bodywork, which we're going to see shortly, but we walk then past some of the engines, which all arrive in these frames to be taken to their respective locations, but the 2.5 litre turbo 5 cylinders ready, of course, for further development and even further parts that are added to help with the motorsport performance. I love seeing this as we go through. We've got gearboxes and diffs all waiting to go in, the mechanical limited slip diff for the rear axle, obviously extensive amounts of wheels. This is quite fun as well, a special innovative transport system used for carbon fiber parts. By having them housed within the solid frame inside padded packages means that the carbon parts can be saved to the very end of the production process without anything risking getting damaged along the way. The sub-assembly stations are actually kept far away from the main line itself, independent operations. And this, for example, is where we have the steering wheel. This is the frame with the hand grips. You can see the quick release pullers that we have as well. On the face of the steering wheel is this carbon panel with your different controls. We have the backing plate with the mechanical shifters as well, and then the display system. Obviously, these all being assembled in the different areas to be taken over to the main line. I always enjoy spotting parts as we make our way through, and of course this is a street legal road car, which means you do need sometimes to open the side windows. You can release those if you need to grab a parking ticket or go through a drive-through, whatever it might be. But you've got all of the different parts lurking, ready of course to head to the assembly line itself. Now that process begins actually with the engine assembly, which is tucked in just over here, and you'll spot up top the engine crane that will then hoist it over to the assembly line. But I want to show you on the engine which has now come together. The parts have been fitted. Because they're thinking about the use of the vehicle, for example, if you drive on track and you spin off into the gravel, you can very quickly then get stones ruining belts and other engine components. Hence, for example, a new carbon fiber shield that's placed over the outside there to improve the usability. The idea is to get the cars out there, to get them driven. But on this side is where the assembly line itself begins. So the engine has been hoisted over to step 1 right here, where we then have at step 2 the rear assembly being put together. This is a steel frame. You can see we've got suspension, we've got brake components. You can customize a lot of things, even down to the color of the springs, which is really quite fun. And we have this 96-litre fuel tank. The big advantage of a smaller engine is being able to have a very large tank, which just again improves usability. All of that then slides along the tracks on the floor to stage 3 to join the carbon fiber monocoque, which itself has started its further assembly, the pushrod suspension exposed over the top, and some very, very clever components. For example, if you look here, this is an unusual system for mounting, but given the ethos behind the aerodynamics of the car is to pull as much air as possible through it, each of these parts also needs to be aerodynamic to help with the airflow, to help with keeping the car streamlined and therefore fast. As we get here, you can see we've got significantly further stages that have been completed. The engine is in place, the exhaust system is in the back, the car is starting to take shape with all of the different components, but you'll notice this fairly large space there for the luggage storage. And on the race cars, given they have a different setup, they do have to have a cat, but a different setup for the exhaust. They also have a lot more by way of openings towards the back. But obviously computers going in, we've even got the fixed harnesses into the back, and you can see now how it is literally just a seat shell that gets placed in here with some pads on it before the car is then lowered to the ground and ready to continue onwards. More parts in place, for example, the wing struts and supports ready to be popped down onto the ground as per the cars in front of us, where you can see different elements, different color configurations and things that people have gone for. This is where the second half of the assembly line then begins. All of the fluids, your fuels, your oils, everything that's needed put into the car here before it's time for the alignment to make sure, well, the geometry of the car is set up, headlights, everything like that is done. We then have the dyno, which is used for a road test. Every car can be driven approximately 10 kilometers on the road to, again, check that everything is working as it should be before we come through. And this is something you don't normally realize. At the very end is when the body panels are put into place. The reason for that is if something needs to be adjusted or changed, you don't have to then fight through them and remove them again, which would introduce a risk of something getting damaged. Behind over there, you'll actually spot the side panels of the car, one of the longest or biggest pieces, 3.5 meters long. Obviously, you need to be very delicate with something like that and want to keep it off the car for as long as possible. On this particular car, if you come through, you'll spot how the customization even allows the badging to be done in a color to match the calipers and the springs, even up on the engine back there as well. And we start to have the full interior all installed into place and prepared, ready for the car to move over to the inspection bay, where the paintwork or carbon fiber will obviously be inspected to the full degree to make sure everything is completely fine. We've got even more parts, and if you imagine these carbon shells for the seats, these weigh next to nothing. They are super, super light. All of the different parts, the pads, all arriving. And this is the kind of infrastructure you expect in a production line that's building thousands of cars. But to be done like this for a very small number, up to 100 cars or so a year, is what's probably the most impressive thing to be taking a look around here. It is time to drive then. This car is ready. This time around we've got satin full exposed carbon fiber. I've just had a bit of an induction tour, if you will, as to how everything works. But basically my cameras are in place. Let me swing in and then get ready to get belted up and go straight out. So step 1 is of course to pull the steering wheel down, pop that in, make sure it's latched properly. There we go. Step 2, ignition on. Everything powering up, foot on the brake, press the button, start up the 5-cylinder. This is quite surreal, quite crazy, but I need to get belted up and then it'll be time to pull this out and go out on the road and see what it's like. Ready to drive then, and I tell you what, it is quite unusual, the view that you have in here. The cameras, I'm sure, are going to become very intuitive in a matter of minutes, but for the first few centimeters of driving, I need to get used to the positioning, the feel. We're in normal and automatic. We'll turn it up through sport, and then there's also a race mode as well, which we shall get to. There are also a lot of similarities in here with race cars, of course. The braking, it's not assisted. You need to be on it with your brake pedal pressure as you're driving. The steering wheel, the squared off shape and feel of it. We're going to be heading on a small section of Austrian Autobahn and then to a nice twisty road, just while I get familiar. If I go into sport mode, we get a different display on the dash. We also have the valves opened and a different shift pattern as well, whereas race then changes the steering feel and weightens it up a little bit more as well. This feels completely like some kind of crazy spaceship. This does not feel like a normal car right now, as we just sit here in some regular traffic, driving in a completely spaceship-esque Batmobile something or other. Not quite sure how to describe it. In terms of seating position, obviously because of being in a fairly narrow, snug carbon fibre monocoque, I'm actually sat quite centrally within the car. I'm actually obviously really near the very middle point of it and very enclosed. You've got these high sides which help with safety, with the security obviously of different types of impacts that the vehicle could have, but crucially also in the pursuit of track experience and proper driving, also the rigidity that comes with that form of carbon fibre tub. This being the road car, we don't have the steel cage as per the GTX and GT2 versions of this. Indicators on the steering wheel. Get familiar with that position and feel as we're driving through a construction site. Normal things for a car like this. And a fairly familiar 5-pot sound. Now, popping the shifter to the right is into manual. Oh, that feels cool. Having that click, that very mechanical noise. Nice gentian blue Turbo S there. This is strange with no mirrors. You've just got to get used to trusting where the other vehicles around are. Okay, we'll ease into this, get a little bit familiar with what I'm actually driving. So we've got the 7 speeds of the DCT transmission shifting up between. I tell you what, I'm actually surprised by the comfort level in here. I've got the AC on at the moment, obviously, because it's a boiling day. I say boiling, it's about 25, 26 degrees Celsius, I want to say. It certainly feels boiling for me because yesterday we were wearing jackets and it was raining. So, very big change. Anyway, so far so good. Let's go find some twisties. After a bit of highway driving, we have come off, and I tell you what, I'm not going to pretend it's quiet. Of course, it's an exciting sports car, supercar. The noise is a really cool tone, and there are a lot of turbo sounds and just generally things going on which make it exciting, which is obviously what you want in this kind of thing. But where it's really going to be exciting is where we're heading, to be able to open up the throttle a little bit more, and the brake becomes very normal very quickly. So does the seating position. You feel very cocooned within the car, which is actually quite comforting. You feel like it's ready to pounce. Obviously it wants to go to a racetrack, it wants to be driven in anger, it wants you to put your foot down and really start giving it the beans. Having now turned off the highway, I have basically been driving in automatic and normal and comfort mode, but now that we're on some nice roads, let's go into sport. In fact, let's go back into manual, take second gear, and this is where the fun starts to begin. Red line is up to 7,000 RPM. You have all sorts of noises and swooshes, a familiar, amazing 5-pot engine note. Takes some getting used to with the brake pedal, because you really do need to exert some pressure down with your right or left foot, depending how you're doing it. This is just in sport, so the steering is actually quite light like this. It will tighten up a lot more in race mode, which you access by pressing R on the steering wheel twice. So press for a second, pause, press for a second again. Just getting familiar with the car. Using some of the revs. I like the shift lights up on the steering wheel. We do have a bit of traffic though, unfortunately. Not all that much I can do about that today. Oh, you can feel quite how light it is. It's very, very agile and nimble across the road. Obviously super stiff platform, but not super stiff ride. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's soft, because it's obviously a car that's going to be right at home on a very twisty, nice road or on a racetrack. But it's certainly, even here, where this is pretty rough actually, rides far better over that than I ever anticipated it would. I think what's surprising me at the moment is that this car is actually surprisingly usable on the road. I thought it would be more of an extreme, uncomfortable, awkward, difficult thing to live with. But the truth be told is that when you're just driving along normally, it's pretty easy and quickly becomes comfortable around you. I need more time to get used to the camera positions, but with a little bit of driving you will. That's not something that's going to be particularly challenging. You just need to get slightly used to looking down at the screens rather than out for some mirrors hanging out over the wings. But the way you feel inside this cockpit is very, very, I want to say fighter jet-esque. You feel like you're in something unusual and exciting and different, and that's part of the fun of this kind of car as we're about to exit this town, which will mean an opportunity in second gear to enjoy a little bit of it up the hill. So here we go. The steering is super sensitive to your inputs. The road twists and turns, nice turbo sounds. You could really punch into the brakes just like you're on a racetrack. I feel like I want to go back to the Red Bull Ring. Those lift-off noises as well. The flutters. Wow, the sharper you come off the pedal, the more exciting that is, as we have a bit of a traffic jam. That was a good short little stretch. Wasn't for long, but I enjoyed every single bit of it. I appear to be a little bit lost in the trees somewhere on a narrow kind of one-track road, but I tell you what, it's an opportunity to enjoy this, and my word, is it a cool drive. It's so raw, it's so much that you feel what's going on, that the car is really telling you everything. It feels like it's a strange crossover between road car and race car, because the feel of the steering wheel and the shifting is obviously race car. It feels like that's what you're clinging onto, that's what you're sitting inside. But driving it on the road, it's also surprisingly compliant. It's not that it's struggling with the kind of roads I'm driving on at the moment. And I mean, this is not exactly the perfect tarmac to bring something that takes part in GT2 class racing for a cruise. I'm gonna try and look over my shoulder. It's a bit of a struggle, but I think we're okay on the road. The way it bounces through using the revs. Obviously, I've also got the 4-point belts around me. This is more like it's smooth tarmac, flowing road, and something that turns like this. We're on Trofeo R's, road tyres of course. It's amazing how much 500 horsepower actually is when you're in a car that weighs so little. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, 62 miles an hour is 3.4 seconds. 100 to 200 is a further 6.9 seconds. 10.3 if you're going 0 to 200 kilometers an hour, 124 miles per hour. And that's obviously because the weight is gone. The weight is completely not there if it doesn't need to be. You have the quad lock mounting system here in the center to replace having a built-in nav system. You can just snap your phone on and have your favorite navigational system open and connect it as well to the sound system also. Built-in USB charging here, everything's there, a couple of USB-C ports,
the creature comforts. There's a storage cubby on the bulkhead behind me. Obviously you can fit a couple of soft bags in the storage area in the back. Inside, there's enough room for your elbows to move around, to wiggle about a little bit, and you don't feel claustrophobic. There's a lot of glass, there's a lot of window around you, there's a lot of light, especially on a day like today where you can see, and then you've just got this fantastic carbon fibre everywhere. The whole thing is carbon. You feel like a couple of seat pads have been bolted into a carbon world. It's that kind of thing, even looking out towards the arches and what's around me, with that quite prominent central wiper. Obviously efficient, because you only need a single wiper blade if you do that, and aerodynamic, because it's right in the middle rather than blocking air across the different sides. But while we just cruise through the villages, you go back to being reminded that this car can drive pretty comfortably, pretty easily, pretty smoothly. I mean, I can pop it back into normal, pop it into drive, exhaust valves will close. We've still got 650 kilometers of range, and we've been driving on an interesting road, sportily, and it wasn't full when we began, which is very, very impressive at the end of the day. And one of the things that really changes usability of something like this, when you have that amount of range, that ability to drive between fill-ups. We are arriving back at base, and I tell you what, I'd be really interested to go and do a long road trip in one of these that involves a track day somewhere, because that's where I think it's so interesting to have a car that is the ultimate track toy, for lack of a better description, that you can actually use in a compliant road environment, despite the fact that it houses a whole lot of motorsport technologies, some very clever stuff going on. As we pull back in fact, I can swing straight back in to the showroom. We're going forwards this time, through the doors, and use in a fairly normal way. That is the magic party trick of this thing, really. Pop it into park. That's basically job done. Literally job done. And then, just because I can, pop open the canopy. I'll show you a little bit more around the interior while I am sat here. It's a very unusual feeling with the canopy opened completely up in front, and then of course the latch down here at the center, give a pull of that, it tucks back down, and you can see that mechanism at work, and the soft close as it then latches itself down into place. Visibility is interesting because of the cameras. They are positioned very low on the sides of the cars, but because you can see the bodywork and the rear arch, there are no blind spots between the side mirrors and the roof-mounted rear view mirror that you can of course see the wing in. Nothing can disappear out of your view. You have the side windows with the hinges to open them up from the latches just towards the back. They swing open to give you a good amount of access out the sides, and there's some storage as well. As I mentioned, this cubby bucket that sits behind, give that a pull, pops down, you've got some storage space back in there, or push this and click it back into place. Of course in here we've got the orange stitching to match the orange calipers and other orange accents of the KTM badging that you have around the car, the 4-point racing harnesses as well. There are a few controls here, touch controls, so even when you're wearing gloves, if you're racing with the Alcantara steering wheel, you can use these. They're haptic, you press them down, you've got your air conditioning settings, a couple of other switches and buttons and things that you might want to access in there. Your shifter, as you would expect, out of neutral into drive. This is where you pull it once more into sport, and you get a slightly different view on the display. So that's your normal view, that is sport, of course, over into manual, or pop it all the way back into park to park up the vehicle and give a press of the button to switch it off. The key tucks away in here, the KTM key, of course, linking to the electronics of the car. On the steering wheel, a few further controls, your indicators, lights, horn, race mode, trip, and then you've got your toggles for the wipers and for the menu and settings and other things. Shifters on the back, really nice feel to it. Super light feeling when you're driving in regular mode. Obviously race, firming it up quite significantly, substantial change. And then just pull on here, that pops open, and we're back to the outside. Super easy, and a great view of the other KTM cars lined up here in the showroom. Driver's side, we've got a speaker grill here, speakers on the other side as well. In fact, the passenger actually has a grab handle, as you can see. Probably need to hold on. There's quite a decent amount of space down in the footwell also, so if you need to fit some extra things in, plenty of room for all of that. And then the adjustable pedal box with the lever down here for my side to tuck that away, as well as the lever here to move the steering wheel and adjust the position of this if you want to have it in quite a wide variety of positions. Obviously this carbon tub, everything around you is carbon fiber. Sitting here, plenty of elbow space for the driver, decent amount of comfort, and you're not feeling too close to the passenger. The seats are far enough apart to leave a little bit of space between them. It's just a bit of a crazy thing when you look up at this all opened up in front. Anyway, let me hop back out. I always find it fascinating when it comes to choosing a specification, the different options and things that go with a car. For example here, different paint frogs. Of course, you can choose an individual color. You can formulate your own color. You can make something completely bespoke to the one-off vehicle. We've got some samples here, some of which are slightly familiar, different shades. For example, right about there, but also the tinted carbon fiber and even down to the different percentage of color within. The same colour done in a different way, giving a slightly different effect. Not sure how much of that with the British Racing Green transfers across on the video, but in person you can spot one is distinctly darker than the other. In a very unusual way, you can also choose your spring colours, so match that through to the inside of the car, the badges that you have around on the engine, for example, even to the perforation and the stitching. Not sure how much of this you can see as I move it around with the different logos and the way that's been created. Caliper colours, different carbon trims, stitching, and of course different wheels. Now there are two different wheel options available for the car. You have the standard 19 at the front, 20 at the rear, available in 5 different colours, or you can upgrade to the centre lock, 20 at the front, 21 at the rear, which is also available in the same set of 5, but obviously different tyre for different things. The 19 and 20 is the Trofeo R, which is your more track going but still road legal tyre, which is probably the one I would opt for. The larger wheel is more for absolutely looking the part, I think with a PS4S maybe, that kind of thing, as opposed to the full semi-slick, let's call it, for track driving. This brings us to the end of the day. What an experience it has been to come out here, to go and see the manufacturing and assembly, and then of course to drive the X-Bow GT-XR, to get a feel for what this thing is all about, to feel how it is literally something developed alongside the race car. It feels like a prototype that you're driving on the road in a surprisingly compliant fashion, as you've experienced and come along with me. A thing that looks extraordinary. The whole drama and sense of occasion by opening up the canopy forwards. The whole story and understanding behind it, obviously coming from motorsport and motorsport success, building the original X-Bow, developing that on, having the GT2, the GTX, and now of course the GT-XR for the road as well. And to see these coming through, the first I think 25, 35, 40 odd cars being built, having come through production, and now to have been out and driven it myself and to understand a bit more how it combines. There are some amazing noises, the turbo flutters and flurries that you hear while you're driving. It is a big car, I'm not going to lie. You're very aware of that, but you do start to learn and become accustomed, certainly to the feel, looking through the cameras very quickly. And I imagine give it another day or two, a double distance of what I drove, and you'd be there almost immediately. It looks crazy, it looks wild, full visual carbon. Of course, you can paint it to have it in whatever color that you could imagine doing, as we've seen with the specifications. But amazing to have that full production process going into something that's still very niche and unusual, something that you're not going to see others of when you're out there, unless of course you're attending one of the team's track days to go and really drive it and get a full feel for what the car is all about. Today has been a lot of fun though, boiling day out here in Austria, so thank you very much for watching. Thank you to the team here for making it possible, especially during the holiday period, to come in, to take a look around and to go out for a drive as well. That's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching as always, guys, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!